Hey friend, welcome to the Self-Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I'm your host, Emily Nichols. As a Whole30 certified coach, wife, busy working boy mom, and your self-care guru, I'm here to help you start putting yourself first without the guilt. Each week you'll hear motivating and practical tips on how you can create a habit of self-care through interviews with my amazing guests or quick solo episodes with me. After each episode, you'll walk away with an action plan and feel empowered to implement what you have learned into your life. So grab a cup of coffee, glass of wine, or your favorite sparkling water, and let's do this. You're listening to episode 51 of the Self-Care Isn't Selfish podcast. If you're wondering, I'm still taking cold showers. Go back and listen to episode 50 to hear more about why I'm taking cold showers. I'll update you throughout the month. It's really not as bad as it sounds, I promise. But it's just a new aspect of my self-care routine, and it really has been a game changer so far. Just the first few seconds really suck, though. Well, let's get into today's episode. So you'll notice the whole month of July, I'm going to be talking about diversity, inclusion, racial injustice, and how we can be allies to our brothers and sisters who are of color. I'm only bringing on guests this month who are women of color to discuss self-care in their various expertise, but also this is a way for you to get some free information that these women have freely given to us about how we can be allies, how we can be anti-racist. So I really want you to take this to heart. This is not about politics or policy or anything like that. This is just about human beings connecting and needing each other to lift each other up. And I'm so incredibly excited about today's guest, Tanorria Askew. I loved this conversation with Tanorria so much, and I know you are going to love it too. I mean, first of all, we talk about food. Yum! She's a professional chef, so she knows what's up. But let me tell you a little bit more about Tanorria. So Tanorria Askew of Tanorria's Table is a passionate home cook turned chef. So she is the proud owner of Tanorria's Table, where she works as a personal chef and a TV personality. You probably see her on the local news on WTHR cooking up a lot of wonderful recipes. It's amazing. So she has a really keen sense of flavor and prides herself in making everything she cooks memorable. With her cooking roots originating from Tennessee, Tanorria has fun putting a modern spin on American comfort food. I'm getting hungry just talking about this, y'all. So really, really cool fact about Tanorria. In 2016, she was a contestant on MasterChef, hosted by Gordon Ramsay, and she walked away as the 4th best home cook in America. That is so cool. And Tanorria and I talked offline a little bit about her experience on MasterChef, because my boys like watching MasterChef and MasterChef Junior. And it was really interesting. She said Gordon Ramsay was actually very, very pleasant and wanted people to succeed. But if he could tell you were there and messing around, he wasn't having it. So yeah, what a cool experience for her. So before Tanorria decided to pursue her career in being a personal chef and being on MasterChef, she was the champion and practitioner for Teachers Credit Union's Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. So she was leading the charge in winning the Indianapolis Mayor's Celebration of Diversity Awards. So what she did then was she blended her passion for cooking and her passion for diversity and inclusion to create unity tables, which we talk a little bit more about in this episode. So what her unity tables is, it's a safe space for women of different races, cultures, and backgrounds to sit around a dinner table and share their heart as a way to create unity. So, since she left TCU, she has had the privilege of speaking to audience as a keynote speaker, MC, and panelist about her significant career shift, diversity and inclusion, social justice, and the courage it takes to chase dreams. So, we talk a lot about this and more, but more so than anything, we're going to be talking about food, bringing people together, and maybe a little bit of an awkward conversation around race and diversity and inclusion. This is an important conversation. Sit back and relax and enjoy this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation I had with Tanorria Askew. All right, gang, thanks so much for tuning back into the Self Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I'm super excited for my guest today, Tanorria Askew. Tanorria, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I love doing podcasts. I don't know why. They're just so fun.
Well, it's such a nice conversation just to have with people, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
Yes. That part is so great.
Oh, God.
I was getting ready for this and I was like, wait, I don't have to like do my hair and put on makeup. This is awesome.
Amazing. It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Well, Tanorria, I always ask my guests this first question. What does self-care mean to you? So, Tanorria, what does self-care mean to you?
It is funny that you asked that because I am just now trying to figure out what that looks like while in therapy because I struggle with self-care. I'm identifying that I feel like self-care is selfish, and so I'm trying to change my mindset and look at what are the things I love. And so I'm like carbs, sugar, my dogs, my boyfriend. How can I like navigate this? So most recently I've purchased an inspirational adult coloring book and some colored pencils. And that has been like, I felt really silly pulling out some colored pencils and coloring, but it was fun. I enjoyed
Absolutely.
it. So that's been good self care for me. I love a good bath bomb. That's wonderful self care for me. And I feel like just doing quote unquote normal things because I'm constantly doing, things on social media and I'm on the news and there's always a bit of a performance factor of
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
And so like my boyfriend and I going to the grocery store has been like so peaceful to me. It brings me
Yeah.
joy just to run errands.
Absolutely.
So
Sometimes it's
yeah.
the most simplest
Yes.
things. Like I know we were talking
Yeah.
last week about your garden, and I feel like that's a high form of
Yeah.
self-care, just
Yeah.
cultivating and growing things.
Absolutely. Gardening, and then I'm learning that cooking for me is a job. It's what I do.
Yeah.
But cooking for me and like saying I don't care if you guys everyone else is going to eat it. I'm cooking this for me. So I'm going to go buy scallops and if you want to eat them great, but I'm cooking them this way and just like letting my creativity flow and not be stuck on someone else's dietary needs or someone else's eating habits. That's been a really good form of self-care for me too.
Oh, I
And
love
harvesting stuff from my garden and cooking it has been really fulfilling.
That's so cool. It's the best. Well, let's talk about you and your background a little bit more if people aren't familiar with you, Tenoria. Can you kind of share your story and kind of where you've been and where you are now?
Sure, yeah. So I was born in Tennessee, but I grew up here in Indiana. We started out living in Kokomo. My mom was like, "Get me out of Kokomo." And so I grew up in Indianapolis, went to Lawrence Central High School, tried Ball State and hated it. But I started working from a corporate standpoint while I was in college. I didn't have to, I just wanted to. I was the kid that played Office when I grew up.
Oh, nice.
So the opportunity I got to like get a corporate job, I was all for it. But I worked at a credit union for 15 years, some on the sales side, but the majority of my time was spent in human resources, training and development, diversity and inclusion. And so I did that for 8 years and probably into about year 4 or 5 of that part of my time at the credit union. I was like, I just don't want to do this forever. I don't want to retire being a corporate trainer. And I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of other things I wanted to do or learn within the credit union space. And so I started cooking for fun. I got my first apartment, and that was how I got my friends to come over, was I would feed them.
Nice.
Um, and so, after so many years of doing that, and just my friends really pushing me to pursue cooking, they encouraged me to audition for MasterChef. It's a show on Fox with Gordon Ramsay. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Gordon Ramsay is going to yell at me. But after studying it for a season, I then auditioned, and that journey completely changed my life. I had started this little side hustle of Tanorria's Table, where I would go into people's homes and kind of create this restaurant experience for them or teach them how to cook. I was doing that before MasterChef, but because of MasterChef and quitting my corporate job, I've been able to do that full time now. So it's been 5 years that I've had Tanorria's Table, 4 years since MasterChef, and I'm just still trying to ride those coattails.
That's amazing. What talk about, chasing your dreams.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing every day, but I love it. I think about going back to my corporate career, and it I literally have like a visceral reaction. But I just, like I said, I knew I didn't want to be in the finance world or even training and development forever. And cooking was just something that I love to do because it brings people together. It
Yeah.
unites people. It's the common thing that everyone like everybody's got to eat
Yep.
some kind of way, somehow. It breaks tension, it builds community, it does all those things. And I grew up in a home where we were always entertaining. We were always the house that people would come over, especially because here in Indiana, we didn't have a lot of family. So for holidays and stuff, we would get other families that didn't have extended family, and we would just create our own extended family holiday. And it was always at our house. My mom and dad were always doing this big to do with cooking. And I was like, oh, this is how you make friends. Okay.
Yep.
And so I knew there was this special, like, unique thing about cooking and feeding people. And I knew that I was meant to make a career out of it. I still don't know what that career is because I feel like it changes all the time, but I'm
Right.
having fun.
That's all that matters. You're having fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think food is a very high form of self-care. And I think food's kind of emotional as well. But I feel like sometimes it can seem really intimidating to people. A lot of people be like, I don't cook. I don't know how to cook. I know how to use my
Right.
microwave or order carry out, but that's about it. But kind of like we were talking about with like gardening, growing your own food and making something out of it. There's something really satisfying to creating a meal and eating it with loved ones. Like you said, it brings people
Yes.
together.
Yes.
But how would you maybe influence someone to start getting in the kitchen and seeing it more as something fun versus something as a
Yeah. I would say make something that reminds you of something nostalgic, your childhood. What's that comfort food? Start there with something really basic like tomato soup from scratch is just sauteed veggies and some crushed tomatoes and seasoning. Start there. If tomato soup and grilled cheese is like comforting to you, it doesn't have to be complex, but the key is to relax.
yeah.
People get in the kitchen and their shoulders hunch up and they feel overwhelmed. And so set yourself up for success and make sure that you have everything that you need. Don't do anything too complicated. I always say, like, when you're having people over, let's say you are, using food to build community, um, and spend time with loved ones. Don't make something you've never made before
Right.
because then you're going to be overwhelmed and stressed out.
Yep.
So just start with something that is simple and that gives you an opportunity to relax in the kitchen. It is an art form, but you do not have to be fancy. One of the things that I learned actually from MasterChef is that I'm not a fine dining chef. It's not my jam. It's not who I am. It's not what I do. I'm a rustic. I want comfort food. I want people to walk away and say that my food reminded them of their mom or their grandma. Like, that warms my heart.
Oh my God.
And so it's okay if, that's the direction you want to go in.
Yeah. And like you said, everyone's got to eat. Might as well make it fun.
Exactly. Exactly. Everyone needs to know how to cook if they love to eat, right?
You're right, right. I know for me, I feel like there's a lot of pressure, just social media. People are like, oh, look at this beautiful recipe I made. And I'm like, do you know just the amount of photos and lighting and, they had to take just to get the picture of the dish? I mean, I know for me, I never measure anything. I'm just like dumping this, dumping that,
Yep.
as I go. And someone will be like, oh, how'd you make
Mhm.
that? I'm like, I couldn't tell you, but it was really good. And
Exactly.
that's just more fun for me too. But I know some people like want to follow the recipe
Yeah.
bullet point by bullet point. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like you said, you've done a really great job using food to bring people together. I know you've had
Well, thank
your
you.
Unity Table series, and I'd love to
Hmm.
hear a little bit more about what you did with that. I think
Sure.
it's really timely to talk about that.
Yeah, so there was a Christian women's conference that I went to in 2015 called the If Gathering, and it was telecast. So I was watching it on a screen with my friends, and the women had one segment that was a unity table, and there was this creator, Latasha Morrison, of Be the Bridge, which is basically the bridges to racial reconciliation. And she had women from different race backgrounds at a table talking about their experiences as women of color. And I was like, okay, I do this on the corporate side. I can like talk about it with my friends and bring my faith too. That's kind of cool.
Oh my God.
And so one of my friends who was actually responsible for helping plan the conference, I approached her. I barely knew her at this point. And I walked up to her and I was like, that diversity thing they did, I'm your girl. And she's like,
I
okay.
love it.
And one thing led to another, and we started hosting unity tables in her home. And the draw was that I cook a meal. So I cook a meal. We get no more than 10 to 12 women together around a table, and we just talk about race and racial justice. And it was all as it was related to our faith, and that like we are commanded to do this. This is a part of, what we are called to do. And so I did that probably, I don't know, 4 years, about once a quarter or once every other month or so. Um, and then they got a little exhausting, because I came into a place where I realized that everyone was relying on me to be their diversity champion. They weren't being diversity champions themselves. And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. And so I was like, wait a minute. I felt like there was no good call to action, and people weren't doing the work after coming to the table. And so I just stopped them for a while. But then, I started talking on panels and keynotes and talking about diversity and race reconciliation, and now it just won't go away, which is great. It's not ever going to go away, but
Yeah. It's a
it's my job
conversation
now.
that needs to have to be had
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and with you coming from being a corporate trainer in regards to diversity and inclusion, I know just
Yeah.
following you on social media, you have been, and you don't have to, putting a lot of educational materials out there for people to become allies. And, our church had a really great conversation with our pastor and another pastor of a predominantly African American congregation. And he said something that really just spoke to me. He said, you can't just say you're not racist right now. You have to be
Yeah.
anti-racist
Anti-racist.
and take
Absolutely.
action and do the work yourself and learn about it. And I can see how, someone like me, a white woman, come to your unity table and be like, oh, this is great. Thank you, Tanorria, for educating me on racial injustice. And it's really wrong. And thanks for letting me know about this.
Right. Right.
But it's one more step that I feel like we need to continue taking action and figuring out what that looks like, but not
Mhm.
completely exhausting our African American friends by reaching out to you and saying, Tenoria, what
Yeah.
should we do?
Yeah. And I have especially now that I don't know if you call me an activist or an influencer, whatever that label is, it stresses me out.
Uh,
But whatever that is,
mhm.
now that I'm recognized as that person, I have had to implement my own self care
Yes.
and not responding to DMs that ask me what you can do. I'm like, just go to my feed. because there's a whole list of things, or go to my blog because there's a whole list of things. That has been a form of self-care to me.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to take a day away from my phone, which is really hard. It's so funny that that is hard because with MasterChef, I didn't have my phone for 2.5 months. But now if you take my phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening to me?
That was probably
But yeah, just
amazing.
it was so liberating. Like
Right.
the first week or two, it was just funny because we'd be talking about something food related and we all go, let's Google it. Oh, wait, we can't. That was the funny part. But afterwards, yes, it was, you were solely focused on why you were there, and that was great. But yeah, even now, um, try not to get on my phone just maybe one day a month is what I'm shooting for. My favorite thing, I feel like this is my armor to do the work, but really it's self care, is not to argue with someone who has never experienced racism. Like, you want someone to understand, you want them to listen, you want the walls to come down, but you don't have to position yourself to argue. I'm like, why am I going to argue with someone who's never experienced it before?
Right.
And so that has been a form of self care for me, in recognizing that I am the expert of my own experiences.
Ooh, you are the expert of your own experiences.
Yeah.
Amen to that. How's that saying go? Oh, yeah, all things are possible with coffee and mascara. Well, that's certainly true for me, and I love to have my coffee every morning after my workout, and I don't really leave the house without mascara. So, my fellow blondies, I know you feel me on this. But gang, check it out. Having my coffee every morning is part of my self-care routine, and I always take my coffee blended with nut pods and coconut oil. So nut pods is a dairy-free creamer. It's made from a blend of almond butter and coconut cream. I love the French vanilla flavor. It's my favorite. It's super yummy, super smooth, but even better, it's Whole30 approved. So gang, head on over to nutpods.com and use the code EmilyNichols22 to get 15% off your first order of Nut Pods. That's EmilyNichols22, EmilyNichols22. And let me know once you receive your Nut Pods what your favorite flavor is and how you take your coffee. So remember, just head on over to nutpods.com. Well, and I feel like the climate in our nation right now, it's almost like there's a sense of unrest. I mean, with all of this happening, it's great that we're having the conversation, but I think coming off the quarantine, emotions were even heightened than what they would already
Absolutely.
been, if you agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're having a lot more uncomfortable conversations that need to be happening. And I know, and now I'm going to ask you, what can I do? Me as a white woman, for me, I'm like, okay, I'm educating myself. There's free information on the internet. There's Google, YouTube, all the things. There's wonderful books you can get to your Kindle or Amazon Prime it in a day and a half. I've been having
Mm-hmm.
conversations with my kids and giving my 12-year-old books and resources to read, watching movies together, thinking about anti-racist organizations we can support. But I'm like, what else
Mm-hmm.
can I be
Mm-hmm.
doing as an ally to help continue this conversation and just set an example for other white folks that, hey,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard the example, of, everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter and people are like, well, no, all lives matter. And the example of the house
Mm-hmm.
on fire, like if
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
fire truck comes up and your neighbor's house is on
So
fire
many
and you run out.
interesting analogies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and you run out and you're like, well, my house matters. But it's such a powerful analogy because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
your house is on fire. What can we do to help extinguish that
Yeah.
fire as an ally?
Yeah. I think one, recognizing that it's a journey that's never going to go away.
Yeah.
Racial justice work is something that will be a part of our lives forever. And so we have to recognize that it's not just a one time thing. There's not a list that we can check things off and
Right.
say, okay, it's done. So I think posturing ourselves in that way, for me, it's a journey. For white people, it's a journey. For other Black and brown people, it's a journey. And so I think recognizing that. I think also when you do go to people of color with questions, position yourself with educated questions. Like, I think the thing that's exhausting and draining, and I'm not trying to speak for all people of color, but in my experience, the thing that's draining is when people say, um, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Please help me. What do I need to do? Please tell me to learn. No, go read the books first and then come.
Mm,
Like, I have this resource guide on my website where you can just download a whole list of books, podcasts, TED Talks. Go listen and read all of that or some of that, and then come to me
yeah.
with like educated questions, and then we can have a dialogue. But to expect us to like start you on your journey and hold your hand, yeah, no.
No,
That's
it's
my
like,
best
where do you
response to
start?
that.
Let me go back hundreds of years and tell you
Exactly.
why this
Exactly.
started. And really, in retrospect, that isn't that long ago. If you look at American history, it's not that
Right.
long ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll make sure to include a link to that as well, because I downloaded the
Yeah.
resource that you
Thank
provided,
you.
and I'm excited to get more newsletters from you too, because I think it's
Awesome.
a really invaluable source that you're providing to people for free.
Yeah. 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 You're
Very
absolutely
nice.
right.
I'm
I'm
hoping
glad you
maybe you
pointed that
email
out.
out a recipe or two later on.
I will. I've got some coming this week or next week.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
tell
And
me. Go ahead.
um I think one more thing that people can do is to, like, now that we understand that there is injustice and that it's real, start understanding like the history of it, understand
Mm,
the systems that have been put in place and how it's systematic racism spread throughout our history, and not just the most recent hashtags that have made it nationally known news.
mm,
So, like, yes, that got your attention. Yes, you're doing the reading, but then let's start talking about the root of things. What is the root of things, and let's understand all of these different systems that have been put into place as far as our education system and our prison system and our housing system, all of those things, and then more light bulbs will start to come
yeah.
on. Dots
Yeah.
will connect.
Exactly. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said, I feel really ignorant in saying this, but I didn't know the difference between systemic and systematic as far as racism goes. And it was just really
Mhm.
interesting because it's never a term that was in her vocabulary. And she was like, I went to
Mhm.
Google and researched it, and now I feel more educated and I can, speak out more on stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're holding an event. It's going to be in Chicago later this year, called This Conversation Might Get Awkward. I'd love to hear a little
Mhm.
bit more about that.
Sure. So actually, we were supposed to have this event in March, and then Rona came, messed it all up for
Mhm.
us. Then we were supposed to have it in May. And so now it's October 9th in Chicago. This conversation might get awkward is basically a awkward conversation between a Black woman and a white woman about race. And because we know that those conversations are awkward and they're very eggshelly, and we are here to just break all of those notions about it being awkward, and we're gonna get over it being awkward. Amanda, we actually met at an event last year, and we sat next to each other on a panel, and I just was saying all these things about race. I have no idea where they just came coming out of my mouth. I still go, oh my gosh, what was I doing? But she reached out to me after, and she's like, there's something there. Like, I want to work together with you. And she is going on her own journey. She's a foster mom to two sweet little Black boys. And she is recognizing a lot about the foster care system and the racism that is woven throughout that. And so we have put together a whole, I think it's 2-3 hour event where we are going to, I say that it's a great place for people to start or continue on their journey. Like, you can't go to this event and be like, boom, I'm an expert, I'm an ally, or I'm a Black person, and now I can, like, have this arsenal to fight all of this racism. I feel like it is a great starting point for some, or a checkpoint for others.
Mm,
But you will walk away with information. You will walk away with resources. You will laugh because I can't talk about anything without trying to make someone laugh.
I love it.
You will laugh. Your heart will be warmed, but your eyes will also be opened.
I love that. And I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes for people
Thank
that can
you.
attend that. So, do you think you'll ever hold an event like that in Indiana?
I think so. That was our plan actually for this fall, was to do one in Chicago and then do one here in Indy in the fall. But since we've moved it back, I imagine if we don't get one in Indy right before the holidays, it'll be early next year.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I would love to attend an event like that. And like you said, I love
Yeah,
that you're calling it this conversation might get awkward because these are awkward and uncomfortable conversations, but
it is.
we have to have them. We have to have.
Absolutely.
And,
Hmm.
just to kind of wrap up, I think a great way to do that is to maybe make a meal and invite some friends over or new friends and get to know some more diversity in your life and some friends and connect over food. It's a very vulnerable place to be, but it's also can be
It
a very
is.
joyful place to be gathered around a table and have just real conversations with people.
That's one of the things that I talk about all the time. Like, it's important not to just call on your one Black friend and make them a token, but at the same time, invite someone to your table that doesn't look like you. You
Yes.
could learn so much. Not only can you learn about them and their life and the things they've gone through, but you're also going to learn what you have in common with that person.
Mhm.
And that's where a friendship could blossom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, invite someone to your table that doesn't look like you. It doesn't even have to be fancy. Like, yes, I want to say cook a meal and, roll out the red carpet because every person that you welcome into your home deserves that. But if you can't cook, order some pizza and get some beer. Make a super cool cheese
Amazing.
board and have some
Right.
wine. I've got a guide for making a charcuterie board on my website. Pull that up, have fun with it, but whatever you do, that food is the common theme.
Mm,
It's that sense of vulnerability. It's breaking the tension, and it's creating a safe space for everybody.
I love it. I love it. Tenoria, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank
I so
you.
loved chatting with you. Where can everyone connect with you online?
Yeah, so I am all over the interwebs, everything. Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, and my website are all Tenoria's Table. I wish my mom named me Susie Smith so that I'm easy to find, but she did not. So it's Tenoria, one N, two R's. If you just start typing in TAN, I usually pop up. So that's where you can find me. Like you've mentioned, I've got a newsletter. I'm probably the most active on Instagram.
Wonderful. Tenoria, thank you again. I so love chatting with you today.
Thank you.
Are you smiling like I am? Tenoria, you just make me smile. Thank you so much for this conversation. I so appreciate you taking the time for providing free resources and your expertise and to inspire my listeners to continue to do the work and learn how to be allies. The movement going on in our country right now is not just a moment, it's a movement. So I hope we all continue to do the work, keep being allies, and lifting up and loving on our friends of color and let them know that we're here to help put the fire out with them. So let me share a few of my takeaways from this episode with Tenoria. Number one, food brings people together. Oh my goodness. It's absolutely true. Think of most social events you go to. You go out to dinner, or this past holiday with 4th of July, depending on if you were able to get together or not due to social distancing or where you're located. People bring food and it brings up conversations, My mother-in-law makes this amazing angel food cake. It's homemade that her mother taught her, and she's going to be teaching myself and my sister-in-law soon how to make that. And there's experience and nostalgia with that, for example. And it's really great to share that story with other people. And it's just such a commonality between people sharing recipes and sitting down and having a meal together and just eating and being in conversation with each other. If you're looking for ways to connect with others, get some food and see who comes to the table with you. Number 2, this quote was amazing. Write this down. Tanorria said, "You are the expert of your own experiences." Let me say that again. You are the expert of your own experiences. I can't say I know what it feels like, or even say, oh, I can understand how a Black woman in America feels. I could never understand what that feels like. Like we talked about, we need to continue to be anti racist, not just saying I'm not racist, but continue to be anti racist by taking action. But also, don't exhaust our friends of color right now. Like I said, Tanorria is providing so many free resources, and her DMs are blowing up, people just wanting to know what they can do to help. So, if you're one of those people, I would suggest you take a moment to take a deep breath, go to the free resources online, and start educating yourself, educating your kids, your family, and just having conversations about what you can do to be anti-racist. And just listen, show up and listen to our friends of color and what we can do to support them. Like I mentioned, I have included a link in the show notes where Tanorria has made this amazing resource to all of these anti-racist resources she has put together. So you, as a white person, as an ally, can go there and learn from books, podcasts, or other articles that she's linked there on how you can continue to be an ally. But just remember, like she said, you are the expert of your own experiences, and you can't begin to know how other people feel who are completely different than you. So make sure to educate yourself and just listen and be there for others during this time. And lastly, I love this. Invite someone to your table that doesn't look like you. And it doesn't even have to be your dinner table, although, like I already mentioned, food does bring you together. But diversify your life a little bit more. I guarantee learning from people from different races, cultural backgrounds, whatever, is going to be amazing. You might just learn something. I know you'll learn something in the process. So don't corner yourself into, a community where everyone looks like you. Diversify it. Show your kids how to have some diversity within their friend groups as well, because it's going to go a long way and it's going to trickle and have an amazing effect for years to come. So, if you want to connect with Tanorria, head over to my show notes. I have her linked on Instagram and tickets to her event later this year in Chicago. If you're a Midwesterner like me and can make the trip to her event called This Conversation Might Get Awkward. I love it because talking about race is an awkward conversation, but it needs to happen in order for us to continue to be anti-racist and allies moving forward. So, Tanorria, again, I'm so hungry after listening back to this episode. I'm going to hop on your Instagram and maybe find a couple of recipes to try out this week. Thank you so very much for this conversation. It was important. It was timely, and you didn't have to provide these free resources, but you did because you, my friend, have an amazing, amazing heart. So friends, make sure to give me a follow over on Instagram at EmilyNichols22 or at Self Care Isn't Selfish Podcast, and share this episode with your friends and the episodes coming up later this month to continue educating ourselves on how to be allies. Honestly, I haven't done the best job diversifying my podcast, so you're going to see some changes moving forward the rest of the year to make sure I'm not, like I said, inviting the same people to the table. I'm going to invite different people from me to my table, and I hope you continue to do the same. And I love you all. That's all I got to say. So thank you again, Tanorria. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.